I'm Sheng Hu. I came to the country 32 years ago.
Yeah.
Came to the U.S. for my degree. I got my master's in China and got my PhD 5 years after I came to Irvine, UC Irvine. And then I moved to Memphis, and then the rest of the story is here.
You've been in Memphis that long.
Yes, 26 years. No, yeah, 26 years, 93.
Wow. Wow. Well, so that brings me to where we are today. We're in Memphis, Tennessee,
Yeah,
and Dr. Hu and I go back. Gosh, a couple years now.
yeah,
It's been a while because it
yeah,
was well before ADL.
yeah.
Yeah. So, and we've worked in the learning technology area, which, as we often like to say, technology does not replace teachers. It enables them to be able to do great things in the classroom, but it also can allow students to be self-sufficient in some ways as well.
Well, I always have the following kind of analogy, like learning sciences versus medical science or life sciences. So, life sciences is like physical well-being,
Right.
fitness. Learning sciences like academic well-being or like intellectual kind of fitness, whatever you can call it. But it's very, very parallel. So, we are learning scientists, or we producing things, right? So I always compare learning scientists like analytic chemistry. They produce the basis for medicine,
Yes.
and we producing things for learning, resources. We know elements of how to make people learn better, but we're not. If you do that comparison again, any analytical chemist, they are not pharmacists.
Right.
So they know how to put things together, but it's the pharmaceutical or pharmacist that knows what is best for individual. And also, very importantly, pharmacists, they actually trying to identify side effect of medicines before they give to the doctor. Doctor probably going to ask what would be the side effect if I have my patient eat this, have this medicine. But right now in learning science, we produce learning resources. But nobody asks, well, if my student using this learning resource, what would be the potential problem for them? Are they going to prevent them to learn something else or other method? They're not asking that question. They're not asking that question like a doctor would ask for the
Right.
patient. And also the other thing which is very interesting. So right now the pharmaceutical company, they're producing medicine. They're producing something. Oh, if you're 65 years old, you do not take this one. If you're pregnant, you're not taking this one. But nothing in learning resources says, you know what, the ratio of this cognitive operation to understand this one is this percentage, and the kids under 15 is not very good. Or say this is too much analytical or logical, you probably do it in the morning instead of after lunch. Nobody actually have that level of descriptions, and which is really causing a problem because you end up having teachers, they have no idea what to choose because everybody says mine is best. Just imagine that as a doctor, everybody can. Oh, I've had a medicine. This is better. This is good. Everybody says their medicine is very, very good. You do not have a choice, or you cannot make a choice.
Right.
It's the same thing. The learning technology or learning science do not move as fast because there's not a rigorous clinical trial that actually involved to really evaluate learning resources like people would for medicine. So what I want to do is really trying to move with that level of rigor for learning science and the learning resources. Because if you imagine that you have something, say, well, geez, the kids are going to learn this one 30 minutes a day for the rest of the entire high school. You have to have something that proving it's actually efficient, effective, in order to make teacher or parents commit to that. Otherwise, you can't.
Yeah, that is something a lot of people don't realize, that in our departments of education, both at the national level and in
Yeah.
universities, the rigor, now that's not to say that all researchers are like this, but the rigor typically is more observation versus necessarily getting into the analysis that we use for medicine or even in psychology.
Yeah.
And it's a big issue. I know we saw it a lot on the inside. Coming from military, people didn't realize we had so much money for education and military, and we would try and coordinate with Department of Ed, but the way we do research is very different.
Yeah, and also we it is very, very hard. For example, if you want to set up some medicine for general public, you need to evaluate whether there's side effect, whether there is long-lasting kind of factor preventing other things, right? The same thing for learning, science. I think if you say let's give this one greatly made kind of learning resource for the student, right? How can you prove the specific way of thinking you introduce to the student,
right,
prevent them from understanding, from other probably, better angle? You don't know that, but that need to be evaluated. The examples like this, for example, you give some, you solve a mathematical problem. It's very, very creative kind of ways to get the student.
Right.
The student maybe say, well, geez, this is so great, but I would not imagine me doing that at all. Very, very good, but that's not me. That would not be my solution to somebody, some genius made that happening, but not me. So do you think that really make them to like the mathematics more, or they just scared away because they're so out of their own, level, right? So those can be need to be evaluated.
So this is getting into personalization.
Yeah.
Right? And I know the pushback from teachers oftentimes, and a fair point, is I have 30 kids in a classroom. How am I personalizing for each individual student? And it might be fairly doable if it is every student is doing a slight different activity with math, but what they're really facing is they may have a kid with special needs in one direction, another one with another direction, another one with another direction, and that multiplied times 30 becomes untenable. So how does technology help with that without taking away from what we know, which is that teachers are so powerful in helping these students in that direct way? So we never want to be replacing that teacher, but how can we enable them?
Okay, so that's a very good question. I'm being around and people asking me, and then about whether computer can replace teacher.
Right.
Of course, the answer would be computers technology is not going to replace teacher, but the teacher knows technology. Going to replace those they don't. Obviously, yeah.
Right.
So in other
Okay.
words, yeah, it's not technology replacing.
Well, that may be a time thing too,
Yes,
right?
yes.
As younger people come in, they're just going to be.
Yeah.
My 8-year-old is better with technology probably than I am. So as she gets old enough.
And then they said, then I will ask them, I said, well, how, a lot of teachers and all people, teacher or not teacher, I say, how could you imagine that technology is going to help teacher? Almost a majority of people said, oh, they're going to help me grade the student homework and then tell me what the student, I said, have you ever been teaching? People they did not teach. They did not really realize what is the most need for the teacher.
Right.
I said, if you're a teacher, what would be the worst thing that you can imagine? For me, I said, if I'm a teacher, okay, the worst thing that I would imagine is I prepared very well for my lecture. And I end up none of the students actually understand what I was talking about. Or everybody knew what I was going to talk about, they ignore me. So technology actually need to help me to say, well, there is this person do not understand me, but this person can, and the other person is way ahead. So the technology actually make me to tailor to the individual instead of for me have no idea what they know, what their skills are. Right? So that's what like a teacher. I'm not saying we use a computer to teach the student. It's actually computer inform me. How do I teach you, because I know exactly what level you are.
So if you could paint a classroom that runs in the way that you would envision it, what would that look like?
Okay, so actually this is real. A company in China is
Yeah.
going to donate a lot of money. Well, it's about 100,000 U.S. dollars
Okay.
to build a state-of-art classroom. Okay, they have enough sensors. Of course, I do research. We always consider the data. What you can to measure, what you can measure.
Right.
As a researcher, what you want to measure, and as a real settings, what is needed to be measured. There are three things.
Right.
Well, in this case, it donated to me as a researcher, so I want to have everything possible to measure because I don't know which one is useful, which one's not. In this classroom, can do the following: can capture individual students' facial expression,
Okay.
their sitting posture, and also teachers' activities. Okay, so I want to use GIFT because GIFT so far, they have a sensory module, and I wanted the sensory module actually measure individual faces, and it's controlled, and then inform teacher exactly who actually from the facial expression understand, what I was talking about, and who is confused, and that way, then I will pointing to student if I realize somebody is confused, then I can ask a question to clarify the confusion. If I know that somebody already knew, then let's assign some advanced work.
Right.
So that's the technology that I can imagine that use what we have known in research.
Right.
And also technology that we have in place, like a GIFT, Generalized Intelligent Framework Tutor.
That's what I was going to say. Tell everybody what that is. So
Okay,
this is
GIFT.
something. Yes.
GIFT is not like a Christmas gift. It's
Right.
GIFT.
In military, we
Yeah.
have acronyms for everything.
Yeah.
So in this case,
It's a
yes.
generalized intelligent framework for tutoring. It was originally developed by the Army Research Labs.
Right.
So we have been working with the researcher for the last 8 years.
And so, in layman's terms, what is that? I will point out that what I like about this is that this is Army built and research. The funds come out of there. It is helpful to military to be able to use, but then it is transferable to K-12 for the research that you're talking about, and yet there's no additional dollars that has to be used. So, but what is it, right? For someone who has never worked in the ed tech space, it's very hard to conceptualize.
Okay, so if you look at what educational technology, there are four components. There are theories in kind of psychology,
Right.
n number of theories, principles, and then you have technology with multiple ways that you actually can use a technological kind of enabling technology. And there are a lot of application fields like STEM and others, right? And also you have impacts or effective on different populations like students or adult training, so on and so forth. So you have almost four kind of variables with every one of this with different levels. So anything that we observe right now, anything tutoring system, even including auto tutor, we carefully select theory, combination of theory, technology, application, and the target. I think this you can draw those kind of lines on every single application we have.
Yep.
And then the field have developed for many years, and then there are a lot of best practices, very efficient, effective products. GIFT is trying to looking at the landscape of those four variables and then with multiple levels of each variable and trying to come up with a general framework that you actually can develop your application in high level landscape.
Right.
And also you're able to compare different approaches. So it's a general framework. It's actually, I think it's a maturity of the ITS.
Mm-hmm.
From the
Individual tutoring system. Yeah.
unique combination of those theory, technology, application, and impacts, now you actually have a larger, I would say, a framework for everybody can find existing applications and also make it possible for people to develop new applications. So that's the framework.
Yes, yes. And so for a lot of people who don't work in this area, having those frameworks that are usable across systems allows us to be able to share share data,
Yeah.
and to make sure that essentially they talk to each other, right?
Yes.
So it's some level of interoperability. And interoperability can be sharing of data. It can be making sure that it's understandable in different contexts. So that has a lot of different meanings, but it's something that most people have not heard of or that don't understand. So I often give the example, like I have to move videos from the phone to the camera to the computer to a different computer, from a PC to a Mac. The interoperability is terrible, and I can't just move the files because they're all saved in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when we start saving things in the same way and we can move them more easily, we're able to actually work together better. And that also becomes true when you're talking about international work. And it becomes true if we think about kids moving from one elementary school to another.
Yep.
It becomes true moving from one job to another. So there's just all these implications that most people are not aware of because it's not seen. It's kind of like the plumbing. It's like, yes, we got indoor plumbing, but that's not the part we see. The part we see is that we have a cleaner house and cleaner streets, right?
Yes. And I think that they always have different stages when everybody trying to be very, very creative and innovate.
Yes.
And the standards probably is a limiting factor at that time because you limited their creativity. But
Right.
once the field are getting the level of maturity, having the standards just make things go much, much faster.
Yes.
It's that's you can tell from the cell phones, for example.
Right.
Before everybody was this own charger. Now you actually can go to places. I want to have a charge, so you can use yours. Now remember, before that's not possible.
Right.
Because everybody wants to create their own. It's very efficient for them to do that.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a phone with different charger, forget it. Nobody's gonna get it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly it. I mean, we see it in web browsing too, that we see it in web browsing as well that certain pages won't come up.
Yep.
And it's getting less, but it's like you said, in the beginning, when you're trying everything, everybody makes their own proprietary piece.
Yep.
And then eventually it gets to a point where, okay, now we've got to have some standards and some agreements so that we can move forward. Because if we didn't get to the point where we had standardization for web pages, how would each of the different companies be able to make things
Yep.
that would be useful? And it is where we're getting to with education.
Yes.
So if we were to kind of tie a bow around this, because obviously we've published this book together, and this comes with this blueprint of here's what we need to see in the future for education, but particularly with personalization and technology. What are probably the top 2 or 3 things that you think we need to be focusing on as our first steps?
There are different levels as a systematic kind of level that a group of us trying to push learning technology as a discipline, like learning engineering.
Yes.
So, if we imagine before we have civil engineering, before we have mechanical engineering, there are a lot of practices, a lot of things that happening, in all different kind of engineering fields.
Right.
But people started having civil engineering and like mechanical engineering. They actually make things scale up.
Yep.
Okay, and also create jobs, create applications. I think right now the learning science and then the learning technology, it's a time for us to really push the idea of learning engineering, which is actually one of the proposal that we're writing for.
Oh,
NSF.
good.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Harvard is definitely well behind this as well. And
Yeah, they have a
agreeing
learning
with this.
engineering kind of program. Right now,
Yeah.
we're trying to see what we have a huge community working on those,
Yeah.
including the people that actually created GIFT, like standardization. IEEE is behind this, so that's one. The other one I think for immediate needs is we need to have data that's supporting where everything we do. Right now, we say, we have educational, big data in education. Well, actually, those are just plain concept. We do not have big data in education. So one thing that I would like to do, I'm actually pushing, I'm not sure whether this one you're going to put into your tape, right? So I'm trying to push in China. It's I'm working with one an educational big data lab. I want to propose a huge project. My mind is like I want to have 20,000 families and follow up from the K until they have 8 years of work. It's 24 years
Right.
of
Wow.
completely following up, and then really have like almost like gene, kind of project to get a complete capturing of their education, training related data. So that's something that when we have those, we probably have enough data to train our theory to really predict student behavior. Otherwise, we still in the stage of playing with the concept.
I pause because I think there's an exclamation point at the end of that. That is the concern that we have. We're guessing more than we need
Oh
to.
yeah, because
Yeah.
it's like a medicine. Even right now, for example, if I say, when I was young, I ate this medicine, maybe 60 years later, my cancer was due to that. You never knew, right?
Right.
But the same thing, I had the difficulty of learning specific skill because I was fixated with specific ways I was learned when I was young. How can you find that? How can you find that? You have to have longitudinal data for those.
Right. 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 Well, thank you for joining us.
Okay.
And thank you, everyone.